All right. Again, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the hour out of your day to learn a bit more about valuation, building that sustainable value for your business. I am your host today, Sarah West. I own Light Consulting, and we've been in business for a little over 6 years. Prior to that, I was the CFO of a real estate development and construction firm. So we have clients across all sectors. We have a semi-concentration in real estate and development, but we also serve professional services, medical services, and all of those organizations as well. So, and retail, a lot of nonprofit work as well comes our way. This is my incredible team. When people say, "How do you get so much done?" It's these humans that really are getting all of the things done. So excited to be walking alongside them through this journey. I'll give you some examples today. These are just to be examples, not to be held accountable to the multipliers that we talk about or the results that we share, because it is just examples. And you would, if you want that in-depth look in your own, we can be engaged in that way. But these are just examples and needed to disclose that we're going to have some different results based on your business and all of those things. So, one thing that I just wanted to hit right off the bat is what is your business worth and why does it matter? And if you guys have any thoughts on that, by all means, raise your hand or shoot something in the chat. But why does it matter? Depending, I know some of you on the call today, some of you are clients, some of you are new names to me in our organization. But knowing what your business is worth is valuable in multiple ways. One would be on your personal financial statement. So as your business continues to grow, and if you have a need for lending, a lending need, then you would have to know what your business is worth so that you can say, okay, my business is worth X. Then if I don't have any debt, then it's really just worth X. But if it is net of debt, then what does that actually look for? And then for a bank, that's going to give them some warm and fuzzies that I can lend you money. And why does it matter? It matters because one, if you're continuing to run your business, that you have those opportunities to leverage that worth and that equity that you have into the business. And if you're looking to sell the business, then also it matters for strategy. One of the things that I often find or sometimes find with people is they come to the consultants or the people who have that expertise either after the deal is done or so far in the process we can't shift the outcomes or the deal points too much without kind of rescinding what we'd agreed upon or what we said. And we really want to be thoughtful about how do we structure the deal if there is a sale or a transition going on to minimizing our tax both for the seller and the buyer and trying to identify what's a win-win here. I see so often that entrepreneurs go and strike a deal and they end up in a situation where they weren't fully aware of the tax implications that come along with that. And a little bit like sometimes if you just do it a little bit different, you get a similar outcome, if not the same outcome, just some of the words that we use. And we're running into that right now when we're troubleshooting a tax situation for 2024 with the 9/15 partnership deadline, where if we just look at it a little bit different, we can save some tax dollars, and which is one of our favorite things to do, is to keep as much money as possible into our business owners' pockets. So just want to check the chat here. Exit strategy. Perfect. It does matter for an exit strategy. And because the one thing, there's two things guaranteed in life. One is death, one is taxes. And with death becomes that we only have a limited time here on Earth. We don't like to talk about it, but it is a reality of the situation. So whether we're choosing to transition our business or the world is we are no longer here, so it needs to be transitioned in that way. We can talk about that a little bit too. I'll expand on that a little bit as well. And so let's dive in to what does it mean to be valuation ready? So this value mindset, it really needs to start if you are having an exit in your organization. This needs to start 3 to 5 years prior to the exit, because some of the decisions that you make in your business might be different if you're actually programming to sell versus if you're programming to sustain, if you will. So if our goal and outcome is to drive the largest purchase price or sale price to an organization, we really want to focus on getting lean and minimizing our expenses, maximizing our profitability, because EBITDA is going to be a major factor, or free cash flow is going to be a major factor in the value that you get paid for your business. So thinking about that is, how do I add more value? Now, that's not a bad move and consideration to be thinking about as you're operating your business for sustainability. So I'm 40 years old. I don't plan to retire anytime soon. I love what I do. So my exit strategy is 10 plus years, not even really in my mindset. So there's some things that I may do in my business today that I may not do in 10 years if I'm programming to sell in 15. Things like being a little bit more flexible and adaptable on some of the things that are run through the organization. So right now, my vehicle and my mileage, or not my mileage, but my gas and all of that stuff is ran through there. Travel, I make sure to have those business trips or those trips that I go on, those business trips that I go on to be a piece of that, where stuff like that, those more discretionary things, or even we invest a significant amount of money into training and development of our team. And granted, we're a small organization, so we can be nimble, but if I were to sell in 3 years, I might consider, let's be more thoughtful in that and making sure that we're doing the training that's necessary, not necessarily just above and beyond. So that, because for every dollar that I drop to the bottom line, I'm going to get 4 times that in evaluation for an accounting firm. So this is where this becomes really important in having the value mindset is, where am I at in my strategic exit? And if I'm within 3 to 5 years, I really want to adopt this mindset and maybe modify some of the behaviors that are in there. Now, the core drivers for evaluation are financial performance. That's the most logical, the most mathematical piece that's going to be taken into consideration in the sale of a sale or transition of an organization, which drives the value. So this makes it a lot less emotional. The things why the multiple range that we're going to talk about is different is because of 2 through 5. The financial performance, it is what it is. But as you guys know, as business owners or people who are making strategic business decisions, there is flexibility and adaptability on what is your capitalization policy. Because let's just say yours is 2,500. Well, almost every laptop then hits the balance sheet versus the P&L, and you're likely going to be paid for your profit and loss, your income statement activity, and not necessarily your balance sheet. Now, if you have assets and your heavy equipment, the balance sheet will take into consideration as well. But for the most part, it's really, what is that free cash flow that I am buying as a purchaser that will drive your valuation. The other factors are operational efficiency, customer revenue mix. If you're highly concentrated with one customer, if you have 80% of your revenue coming for one customer, then that's going to influence the valuation. I remember with my days at Rowers, we had a property management organization approach us about buying them. The individual owner operator wanted to get out of the organization, out of property management, and can't imagine why. There's a person in property management here, wanted to get out of that, closer to retirement, and came to us for a table. And from a financial performance, we should pay X for this business. Well, part of the issue with that, and what we decided to decline making an offer on it, is because their number one customer, had 85% of the units, and then 15% of it was a little bit of a mixed bag. Well, if we don't have a relationship with that customer, which we didn't at the time have a relationship. So if they just find out, hey, property management company that manages was 85% of the revenue we'd be buying is new, and they didn't like that. Like that just went from the business being valued at X to now it's negative and it's not having a cash flow. So making sure that we take those things into consideration. Your leadership and talent that retains in the organization will be a piece of the valuation, and then the market position and differentiation is a piece of it as well. So just what you are. So let's go through those financial performance things first. This is where they're going to go to first, and then everything else is going to be a plus minus of this. So many of you probably have purchased a home at some point, and if you got a mortgage on that home, you were required to get an appraisal. And the process in valuation is actually very similar to that. The issue with that is in a home ownership or buying and selling residential real estate is there's a lot of comparable data. So what they do in that appraisal process is they say, okay, you are buying this address and here's recent comparable sales that have happened, and then they plus minus. So you have a bigger lot, so plus 20,000. They have a three stall versus a two stall garage, so minus 20,000. You have an additional bathroom, plus 15,000. The year is newer, plus and minus. So if you've ever actually read your residential appraisal, those are the things that are going on here. The business operation appraisal is actually super similar to that. And I'm going to actually show you one of an organization that we bought 3 years ago and what that appraisal looks like so that you guys can say, what are the factors that this company that I'm going to pay XYZ dollars amount to give me a valuation, what are they going to be looking at? And the three things here are really the keys to it. It's gross sales, it's EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation and amortization. And then there's a multiplier, and that multiplier will be a range of numbers. And depending on the industry you're in, that's will determine your range of what is the number times gross times EBITDA that then ends up being it. And then that's where the flexibility kind of lies. If I have a high performing team, I'm barely in the business anymore. They can run this baby without me. We have a great customer mix that are loyal to the organization. It's super sustainable revenue. Then I'm going to have a higher multiplier than that example that I gave where there was a concentration with one customer that would be on the lower multiple end of that. So let's go a little bit into gross sales. So I'm actually going to, if the document loaded, and I know I have like 8,000 PDFs open. Okay, so this is a business valuation for the Dale Carnegie franchise that our team purchased, or I purchased in 3 years ago. Melissa runs it. She's incredible. Thank God every day for her, so that I can live in my zone of genius, which is on this side, and she can just be an amazing human on that side. So this is no different than, or not that much different from a commercial appraisal if you guys have ever hung out in the commercial real estate world. So front page tells you what it is. So here's the valuation of the business. Now, this is a professional service business, so there's really not a lot of assets outside of computers and some training materials. There really wasn't any assets. What we're buying here is the future cash stream of the organization. And again, this is confidential information to you guys that we're just sharing. So no screenshots or anything like that. But I just want to show you some of what they do. So we talked about the residential appraisal process. And this is, again, if you want to value your business, you don't necessarily have to go to a valuation firm to be able to do this because you can kind of run this very similar to that. So what the methods that they use were the income approach, the market approach, controlling interest transaction method, and then the market approach rule of thumb method. So in commercial real estate, the three methods that they use there are sales, and that's the comp. Then they have a cost method, what it would be to build, and then they have a cash flow method. So if on a um, if you have a, okay, let's, I don't know if that's you, Drew, if it's anybody else. You can't record, but you will get a copy of the recording. So let's not request that anymore. or we're going to continue to have that pop up. Okay, so there's these multiple methods that are going on here, and they gave it various weights. So what we're going to just move through is what I want to go to is the P&L here because you'll see where they had additions and subtractions and how they came to they do industry at a glass, like a glance. How big is this industry that is a part of so this is the well, they looked at business coaching. So Dale Carnegie is a coaching organization, a training organization, help transform lives, win friends and influence people. Those of you who are familiar with us are familiar with them. So here's some industry metrics that are super helpful for that. And so like if we were outside of line or we maybe weren't as much as profitable as this, then some of that would be adjusted for in that. So again, this is like a many page document. Oh, actually it's only 43, not too bad. So here's the information that they got. This is a balance sheet. So again, the balance sheet isn't too important because cash is a part of it. Um, I don't think I've ever been hacked before. Now it's trying to.
That was me, Sarah.
Oh, okay. I
Yep.
denied it, so you're gonna have to try again.
Okay.
Um, Okay, ratio analysis, all of that stuff. Again, balance sheet only matters if you're buying the assets and not the cash flow. Okay, so here's historical information. So net revenue is gross. That's where we were in the slides, is moving in through gross sales. So you can see their annual gross for fiscal year 2019, 2020. If you guys knew what happened there, we were, and well, it's only 1 month, but also there was a dip in their performance. You can see that a little bit in 2021. Part of the reason that was is because if you guys were around, which all of you were, during COVID, in-person training went to zero and we had to pivot and do that. So the last 12 months, this is the revenue number that was used in this valuation. Officer comp is pulled out. So the owner compensation is pulled out separate from wages and salaries. And why that is because it becomes a part of discretionary income to the future buyer. In this case, the people we're buying from were owner operator, and the people that the way we were going to set it up is also owner operator. So that was what was going on there. And then all of these other expenses are pretty normal. So nothing really to talk about or think about there. Besides, we have EBITDA down here at 193. You can see it was at 262 the year before. So 2 solid years of financial performance that come with that. So here's the adjustments that it talks about. So if you just take your income statement and you want to do your own valuation, here are some of the things that might be adjusted. So officer compensation. So in this case, we had two owners that were involved in the business that needed to be added back to discretionary income, payroll taxes for those as well. And it did any depreciation or amortization was also. So this is a pretty straightforward one. Again, it's not a lot of assets. It was just a part of that. So we have unadjusted net income that you saw in there. We pull back some officer compensation, license. And what they did here is they only pulled back a portion of it because they were operating in the business. So then we have adjusted EBITDA and the adjusted EBITDA as a percentage of revenue. Why this matters is, does this make sense based on, does this adjusted EBITDA make sense based on the industry that we're in? So I just wanted to share an actual live example with you. Again, I apologize that somebody came that I let somebody into the meeting that shouldn't have been there. That's really embarrassing, but I guess I don't have any control. So there we go. So EBITDA, again, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. If you're using QuickBooks as your accounting software, net operating income is typically where it lies because we want to put interest and depreciation below that. And why we do that is interest and depreciation and amortization and even taxation, those 3 or 4 expenses have more to do with how you're structured as an organization and what's going on your balance sheet than they do on your P&L side. So that's the different um, that would be that would be a piece of it. So let me keep going here. Again, sorry for that little thing that's throwing me off here a little bit. Industry multipliers, so seller discretionary earnings. We just talked about that a little bit. That's why there was that add back when it came to the seller discretionary, the add back when it came to owner compensation. And then EBITDA, and then your revenue multipliers would be the piece of those. So I am going to run through some multiplier factors. Again, this is why it shifts, and you'll see in just in the next slide why it's higher, lower, and some different things is that owner dependency, reoccurring versus one-off revenue. So sometimes even in because if I'm selling, I want to drive that EBITDA number up, and I might say, okay, well, this is a one-time thing. So what we sometimes see is like legal or professional fees that are one-time things. If we had a lawsuit where we had some attorney fees in a year and we needed to, and that's not actually a reoccurring expense, then we want to pull those things out. And we want to pull those things out before we present them, but we also don't want to lie because often what's happening in these situations is they ask for our internal financials and then they ask for our tax return. So they should be close-ish. If I were evaluating somebody's information, you brought me an opportunity that you were potentially going to buy something, I would ask for both of those pieces of information. Client concentration, we already talked about that. Size and scale. So and that goes into a little bit of the growth. So are you a little fish in a big pond? Or are you big fish in a little pond? Or what does that look like? And what's the scalability, the growth of that? And then obviously where you are located affects that too. So for those of you who are on the call, you probably know a little bit about the difference between being a business in Minnesota versus North Dakota, and understanding that there's different employment law in those two states that is just something to navigate. So that will influence it as well, even from a taxation perspective. So one of the things that is a piece of, I just want to check, piece of all of this is from a taxation standpoint. So I know people are like, well, I'm a North Dakota business, but I do business in Minnesota. The state laws are all different. So you probably are going to, if it's just an income tax thing, your income tax, depending on your legal structure, will flow different for that. And a lot of states still get their cut, if you will. So we're a North Dakota business who does business in Minnesota, Colorado, and Wisconsin, and we get to write checks to Colorado and Wisconsin and Minnesota every year as well. So if you're making that location decision, but it does influence, so there's the sales and then also from an employment law standpoint, where are you located? So here's some industry multipliers that we've experienced both on our clients buying and on selling, well, and not me personally buying. So professional services is 1x growth often, or 3 to 6 times earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation. So I threw specialty medical clinics in here. So whether that's dermatology, and we've had a few more of those pop up in our area, and I couldn't find a gross number, but that EBITDA number is 5 to 8 times. So if you're dropping, just for easy math, $100,000 to the bottom line, you could potentially have 5 to 8 times X in that in your value. So let's just use that as an example. So if I'm a specialty medical clinic and I'm doing $100,000 bottom line, just roughly, and I always like to be under promise and over deliver. So let's just say your business is worth $500,000 because you're dropping 100,000 to the bottom line. Then, okay, so if I have a $500,000 business, but I have a $200,000 loan against my business, then my actual net worth of that business is 300,000. So we have to make sure that we're accounting for the debt that is included. Home services, similar type thing. So this is plumber, fix-it people, lawn care would be in there as well. Small contractors, this should be there should be a point in there. It's like zero point 0.4 to zero point 0.8 of gross. Again, contractors, they might do a lot of business. Like when you sell a house, they probably sell a house for 350,000, but they probably have 275 into it from a cost perspective. So that's why the numbers are different, or 4 to 9 of EBITDA. Bar restaurant, I've actually ran into this in a situation. Again, a client came to me. They had already inked the deal of the purchase price, and because my client wanted to do the right thing, they wanted to honor that. So at that time, we didn't have any opportunity to negotiate price, but they were overpaying for it. At like, what was it? I know what they paid for it. They paid 750 for it. And they probably should have been paying less than 200 for it. So we ended up, yeah, being in a funny spot. We did negotiate the breakdown because, again, on your purchase agreement, it matters whether you're allocating things to assets or goodwill, or blue sky is another word for goodwill, or what you're allocating those assets to, or that purchase price to. All right, operational efficiency. Let's talk about this a little bit too. How good is this business operating without the owner present? So, because if you are a person who likes to observe organizations that are being bought and sold, you can kind of see some of this stuff unfolding. And I would continue to encourage you to be students of life. The owner's role is going to play a significant part on whether we're paying that high multiple or that low multiple. And what that is when the owner steps out of the business, because this is often a valuation is derived by a transition. So if the owner's stepping out of the organization, what steps out with them? That's a really important consideration to consider, because if it's the customer relationships are all with the owner, if the team is held together from a glue perspective and being able to do their job by the owner, if the owner's performing a huge amount of the work, that also is an exposure. So what is that current role, and then what is the continued role? So not saying it can't be possible, but the success rate of the new business is lower. Now, whether you're sitting on I am in the business right now thinking about transitioning out, or if you're sitting on the buyer side, these things still need to be discussed about, just your outcome and your drive. Like on the buyer side, I want to pay the lowest but still appropriate amount. I don't want to overpay for it. So I need to make sure that I'm giving this owner role enough weight. And if you're internal looking to exit, then it would be like, although I know I probably do more than I should, I want to drive value. So I might say that that I don't do a lot. One thing that I would encourage, if anybody is actually thinking about buying a business, and that I would do, and if allowed, and I know a lot of times this is not allowed because we have non-disclosure agreements, is to have conversations with the people in the organization prior to inking the deal. And why that is because what is this really going on here? Again, if you're not paying a substantial purchase price, then probably is less important. But if you're writing a big check, it is important to know, okay, the owner says that they're not that involved. Like in the case, we anticipated that there'd be processes and procedures for everything, and there was, and it wasn't documented. So those processes and procedures and ways of doing things left when the owner left as well. So we just creating that awareness. So if you're on the buyer side, we want to ask those questions. If you're on the seller side, you want to have as much of that stuff documented and not in the hands of that owner. And same with other key individuals. If you have a bunch of VPs that are close to retirement, we just want to make sure that they have somebody who is able to do their job and really not miss a beat, because if I'm purchasing you, I'm purchasing a steady revenue or an income stream, and I want that to continue. And then that leads to those processes, making sure that they're documented and repeatable and not dependent on one person to execute them. So, customer and revenue mix, I talked about this a little bit with that one that was highly concentrated. The other thing is recurring and diversification. And for those of you who know me, know that I just am a pretty much open book. So, one of the things that we didn't probably give enough consideration into that purchase that we made 3 years ago is the mix of reoccurring versus have to go find more revenue on that one from a valuation standpoint. We probably should have paid a little bit less now that we are eyes wide open and know that for a chunk of that, it's a lot of the relationships. We maybe didn't give enough weight to the owner's relationships, but also what portion of that is reoccurring. Because in the training business, a lot of organizations train their team and then they think they're done. And that is, and then for like consulting, that's more of an accounting and CFO organization. That really is recurring. So it's much harder to say, we're actually just not going to do our books anymore and not have financial statements anymore than it is to say we're going to pause on training, right? So our model in Light is reoccurring revenue, and the model in Dale Carnegie is different. There's somebody else trying to get in, but I'm just not going to let anybody else in right now. So that diversification is also a component of it. So right now, thinking about what is your revenue streams from a opportunity. So looking at some of the people that we have on here, Lori's in property management. So diversifying some of the housing components that they have. So whether they're in single family, mixed use, or not mixed use, multifamily. So having a little bit of diversity is helpful. Also having a diversity in the type of clientele is also helpful so that if a market suffers, then you are still going to continue to move on in this. Again, we're trying to, in valuation, we want to minimize risk. And we talked about the concentration, having one customer that is the highest revenue mix, and that's just not good. All right, leadership and talent. This is another piece that will drive whether you have a higher valuation, a multiple, or a lower one if your team is really strong. So asking yourself these questions of can this run without you? Is the team equipped to make day-to-day decisions? So if the team can't run without you, if it's really stuck on you, then I really want you to think about what can I do different in the next 3 to 5 years so that when I exit, this organization is running smoothly because that'll drive your multiplier up. So rather than getting 4 on the low end of the multiplier, maybe I can get 9 if I have a really strong leadership team that's going to be transitioning and creating that value for the next owner. Succession planning, making sure you have the right people in the right seats, and then you have some depth to it so that if something so let's just say that I have a top salesperson in my organization, and if I don't have anybody to back them up, that is an exposure from a buyer perspective. So one of the things I would ask for if your organization is heavy on customer relationships is tell me about your top salesperson. And let's just say again, here's what the concentration. If Susie is doing 80% of your sales and you have a sales team of 5, my question would be, okay, what's Susie gonna stay or go, or what's going on with that? But also understanding is does Susie have a Sarah that's coming up right behind her, and really what does that look like, and how do I understand that better? That's where the development plans are in place for everyone, at least everyone who's in leadership roles. And culture matters too. So the famous quote of culture eats strategy for breakfast. We can have the best strategy, but if our culture is crap, we're not going to get moving too fast, and that will influence that multiple to be on the lower end. Market position and differentiation. So your brand, it matters. So part of the reason that we purchased the Dale Carnegie, now could we have started a training and development organization on our own? You bet. We actually tried that, and we did get some traction, but not enough for sustainability, where the Dale Carnegie brand has been known for over 100 years, and it has intellectual property. That is a piece of what we purchase. So that drove the valuation of that too, is that it's sustainable, it's transferable to a new owner. So one of the things that when people come to me and ask, hey, I want to start a business, what should I name it? I don't tell them what to name it, obviously, but I say things that you might want to consider is naming it not your name. Like I could have had Sarah West Consulting or SW Consulting or West Consulting or something like that. Not saying it's the worst thing in the world. Some brands live beyond names. Shields is right across the street from where I am today, and that is a name and a brand that has evolved. But I would have you think about what is that actual brand that I am selling and what is the value of that brand. If you have a current organization that you're not elevating the brand, I would encourage you to do so. One of the examples that I love to share, and because I'm observing it from a press or from a just person in the community observing different businesses, is the Magnum Electric brand that was and then that is. So before it was black and white, it actually looked very similar to Magnum Trucking from the font and the way the words were slanted. And now they have the ME logo. It's blue. It's on trucks. They have their powerhouse. They have a lot of things going on there from that rebrand standpoint. So now that brand can go into different markets or even go into markets, and that recognition, that is so important. That's why franchises actually even exist, is because of that brand recognition. So kids recognize Coke and McDonald's and some of those national brands, probably Starbucks, before they're 2 years old, and that has to do with influence on that. So if you haven't done a brand analysis and thinking of how does that drive valuation of my business, then I would encourage you to do that. IP is intellectual property. What are the processes and the things that I have that are of value? Again, your customer lists would be an example of an IP, or a process that you do things would be a example of IP. And then the competition. What does a competition look in in your industry? Risks and red flags, owner dependency, again, depending on a key person, poor documentation, lack of clear financials, and over reliance on one customer or supplier. We talked about those two, and reactive versus strategic growth. When you go into the table to negotiate what your organization is worth, it's really helpful to say, and this is what we're projecting for the next 3 years, versus saying, well, we just wait till we get the financials back from XYZ, and that's what it is, what it is, right? So being organized and thoughtful and strategic will get you that higher multiple in your organization. So the steps that you go through in becoming valuation ready is assess your current state. Where are your financials landing? What are things, would you be on the lower end of that multiple or a higher end of that multiple based on those other things that we talked about? Prioritizing initiatives. So if you are on the, hey, we want to exit, or the owner wants to exit at 3 to 5 years, making sure that you have those things, those initiatives that you're going to get done, and prioritize them. So some things might, so if you're thinking in 5, 10 years, I want to sell this organization, then maybe a rebrand is a part of it and really hitting hard on that market penetration. But if you're selling in less than 3, a rebrand can be very costly. And from buying all the signs, all the shirts, all of the things, investing in a new website, all of those things can be super expensive. And if it's, again, 3 years or less, that those expenses, although we can say those were one-time expenses in the rebrand, again, it becomes a negotiation piece, and the buyer is going to be like, well, those are still expenses, so I'm not actually going to pull that out from that valuation. So I would just caution you, if you're 3 years or less, not investing in a lot of those things. If you're 5, 10 years out from a potential exit, then thinking about those things more strategically. Implement scalable systems. That is, well, no matter where you're at. So how do you make it not re or make it repeatable, not dependent on humans or yourself as a business owner? And then step four is regularly measure and adjust this valuation checkup. So because we bought that business 3 years ago on an annual basis, I do just a quick worksheet to understand what is this business worth? Have we added value or decreased value on that as well? And on that framework to use. So we use the EOS model, and we on an annual basis look at what we're doing and are we building value in the organization? So being mostly an accounting firm, our drivers are top line and bottom line. And because we make a strategic choice to have charitable contributions at 10% of the top line, that's an add back for us because the next business owner would have to make that decision whether they're going to do that or not. And then we can say, okay, did we increase value this year or not? And then what are the strategic moves that we're going to make to continue to increase value? The hard, right decisions. And Drew can attest to that this year we've had to make a lot of hard, right decisions. And the good news is our team is thriving and doing the things. So one of those things that we do is we track our a number, and we track our numbers. And why that is because everybody has a number that's part of an EOS, the EOS program. And we were all in the green last week. We were all in the green 2 weeks ago. Labor Day weekend, ours is utilization. So it was a little bit different then, but we are back in the green and running as a smooth operating machine. So I wanted to save a few minutes here at the end for questions. I'm going to stop recording in case you wanted those questions to be more for just you.